Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Chainsaw Man, Buddy Stories. Chapter 3. The day they became buddies. It was white outside the window. Pure, unbroken white. The blizzard disgorged by the leaden skies overwhelmed everything: the exposed black soil, the cracked asphalt, the withered stalks of grass battered by the wind. The snow blanketed the city with untainted white. It seemed like the heavens were trying to erase the flawed world and return it to a blank slate. No matter how deep the snow got, Aki knew his memories would never be buried. He had lost his entire family in an instant, and the dull ache in his chest would never go away. Aki let out a faint sigh. His eyes drifted from the window to his room in the old-fashioned inn. Denji lay spread-eagled across the antique futon, tangled in blankets. Power had draped herself over Denji's legs, which stuck out from under the covers. Somehow they managed to survive the relentless parade of international assassins who had come after Denji. Now Aki was in Hokkaido to pay his annual respects at his family's graves. The two traveling companions he'd been saddled with had made it a livelier trip than usual. Shouting on the bullet train, puking on the boat, swinging on the hand straps on the bus, they even helped themselves to the food Aki had brought as a grave offering. He felt like a babysitter. He couldn't take his eyes off them for a second. Hardly the ideal situation for a sober memorial outing. He raised an eyebrow at their snoring. The sounds weirdly sort of harmonized, then looked back out the window. Another year, another visit. Visiting his family's graves brought nothing but bad memories and depression, but with Denji and Power along, he barely had time for dark ruminations. Now that he finally had a second to himself, he found his thoughts drifting back to another loss. They'd met in a graveyard, hadn't they? Looking out at the world gone white, Aki remembered the day of his very first assignment as a public safety devil hunter. When Aki completed his training, the first place his mentor Kishibe took him was a graveyard. Crosses stretched in every direction. The cawing of crows pierced the sky. "Hey, Himino," said Kishibe. "Meet your new partner." Flowers lay before one of the many tombstones, and the woman who was to be his partner stood in front of them. The woman Himino apparently was in a badly battered state. A bandage was wrapped around her head, covering her right eye, and her right arm was in a sling. She gazed down at the tombstone, ignoring the two men. What Aki felt at that moment, to be completely honest, was disappointment. If she'd been roughed up this badly in a fight with a devil, maybe she wasn't so tough. He joined public safety to kill the gun devil. How could he do that with a weakling at his side? "Name's Aki." "Sup," he said. He offered a quick nod as he stepped up to her, not feeling enough enthusiasm for a friendlier greeting. She continued to stare down as if dazed. Well, fine. He'd kill the gun devil on his own. He didn't like to get close to new people anyway. It was his personal code. "The kid's rude, but we've trained him to be at least a little useful," said Kishibe. "Try to make it work." Himino didn't lift her eyes from the grave. "Are you useful?" "Dunno." "Guess so." Normally Aki had total confidence in his abilities, but the question took him by surprise. Himino answered with equal ambivalence. "You're my sixth partner. The others are dead." They were useless. Aki didn't know what to say to that. Himino's soft, cold voice seemed drained of all emotion. He was scrutinizing her profile, trying to decide what to make of her, when the distant eyes finally turned on him. "Don't you die, Aki." Their first job together came exactly 2 weeks later. "Where are we going?" Aki asked. The moment he arrived for work, she grabbed him and said, "We're off." She'd hustled him into the passenger seat of her car, then climbed up. Aki had no idea what was going on, and it was starting to get to him. Himino kept her hand on the steering wheel and her eyes on the road. Scene of the crime. Scene? Crime? Has there been a devil attack? Aki asked. Not exactly. More of a fiend. I didn't hear anything about this. Didn't I tell you? Not a word. That's okay. You're still new, Aki. I know what's up. Maybe I'd like to know too. That ramen place we just passed is really good. Are you listening to me? But you don't want to go for the ramen, Himino continued. It's all about the fried rice. Their ramen is crap. Everyone just orders the rice. They really ought to ditch the noodles and focus on fried rice, but old habits die hard. She sounded relaxed. Calm. She wore a patch over her right eye now, but her left eye was clear and untroubled. For 2 weeks she'd been like this. The woman Aki had met at the graveyard, the grim specter whose soul seemed to have left her body, had vanished. Instead, she chattered endlessly about frivolous, trivial subjects. She'd tell him what she'd eaten yesterday, or which restaurant had the best waffles. When she wasn't talking, she was furiously doing paperwork. It left Aki feeling unmoored. It still didn't seem like he was a devil hunter. Now they were finally off on a devil extermination mission, and she wouldn't even tell him what it was. What was she thinking? Aki sat back in the passenger seat. The truth was, he could guess what was going through her mind. She didn't think of him as her partner, not yet. She'd lost 5 partners before he came along. She didn't need any more dead weight. That was fine by him. Her injuries had healed, but he didn't need a partner who would let herself be caught unawares by a devil. He'd almost said as much to her, but he knew he was still a greenhorn and couldn't pick and choose his partners. In public safety, the partner system was the basis of everything. If he really wanted to find and destroy the gun devil, he had to win this woman's trust, whether she deserved him or not. He gave Himino a sidelong glance. I'm more than another round of cannon fodder, you know. Did you say something? Nothing. I'm going to open the window. No, don't. It's cold outside. Your cigarette stinks. Himino's left hand was on the steering wheel while her right clutched a cigarette. The car was choked with the smell of tar. Aki, don't tell me you don't smoke. Do you have a problem with that? Not really. It's just that for such a surly guy, you're a kid at heart. Hey! Close that window! Come on, your senior officer is cold. You don't get to lord your authority over me just because you're a little older. Does that mean you don't accept me as your partner? That's exactly what it means. We're 2 of a kind, then. Aki didn't respond. The car filled with the crackle of wind, the cold winter air, and a determined silence between the hunters. Cigarette smoke drifted out the window, a long, thin strand trailing into the sky. I'll check in with the guy who called us in, Himino said. Stand at my side and observe. Aki didn't answer. That was all she had to say when they got to the scene. Her message was as clear as it was unwelcome. Watch and learn, rookie. Aki climbed out of the car to see that they parked in front of a sprawling apartment complex. The buildings had fallen into disrepair, but the futons draped over the balcony railings and the laundry billowing in the wind showed that the place was still at least partly occupied. An old man stood at the entrance. You must be the devil hunters. From public safety. Thank you for coming all this way. He handed Himino a business card identifying himself as the head of the company that owned the complex. The man escorted the hunters to his office and quickly filled them in. Several of my tenants were attacked by a fiend this week. It's discouraged some prospective occupants from moving in and convinced several current residents to move out. If things get any worse, I'm afraid my business won't be able to sustain itself. It obviously pained him to say this. Aki recalled the number of empty windows he'd noticed when they arrived. Can you describe when and how the fiend attacks? Himino asked with a practiced air. Let me see. It comes out at night, starting after dusk. It rings the bell outside an apartment, then attacks when someone answers. That's happened 3 times now. Has anyone gotten a look at it? It wears a hood, so no one has a clear description. But everyone agrees it has sharp fangs. Certainly sounds fiendish. Fiends were human corpses possessed by devils. Their non-human quality was frequently betrayed in the face or head. They had the minds of devils, but some retained memories of their hosts' human lives. They also claimed it had a weapon, the old man continued. Some kind of small crossbow or bow gun. A crossbow, Himino repeated, rubbing her chin and looking at the ground. Slowly she raised her head to meet the man's eyes. I'd like to see it for myself. Is there any security footage? I'm afraid we don't have any cameras, this place being as old as it is. Then how are you so sure of all this? Did the building superintendent see it? No, he isn't here all the time. He hasn't seen the creature yet. What kind of eyewitness reports are you basing this information on? Himino asked. Aki had the same question. The man's response surprised them both. Reports from the victims. There are 3 survivors. Himino and Aki exchanged a look. The first witness they interviewed was a portly middle-aged woman. Despite her girth, her cheeks were gaunt, and she looked ready to collapse at any moment. She entered the office, sank into an uncomfortable office chair, and began her story. My name's Sato. I live in apartment 101. I was attacked 5 days ago. The doorbell rang just as I was getting dinner ready. I couldn't see much through the peephole, but it looked like a man in a black hood. He kept his head down. The moment I opened the door, he raised some kind of weapon. Then an arrow came straight at me. She broke off for a moment to collect herself. He must have missed me, but I fainted from shock. When I came to, maybe 15 minutes or so later, I ran to the living room to see if my family was all right. There she'd found her elderly mother, her husband, and their 2 children lying dead with arrows in their chests. That was the last detail she was able to get out before breaking down in tears. After Mrs. Sato had left the room crying, Himino leaned back in her chair. You all right, Aki? All right with what? You look awfully on edge. Aki didn't say anything. You can't get too emotionally invested in the victims. You won't. Last. I know that. If Himino thought he felt special sympathy for someone who had lost her entire family in a single devil attack, she had him all wrong. It only reaffirmed his dedication to his job. I'll do more than just sit and cry. I'm going to find the devil that took my family away and kill it. Their next interviewee was a 30-something man in glasses. Named Shinohara, apartment 202. He seemed relaxed and open, but his shoulders were slumped. The doorbell rang 3 days ago, right as I was making dinner. My wife went to answer it. You see, I'm the cook in our house. The next thing I heard was a scream from the front hall. His hands clenched on his knees. I rushed over to find my wife had collapsed. A guy in a black hoodie was standing over her. It looked like he had fangs growing out of his mouth. Before I could even try to get away, he pointed a little crossbow at me. That was when I passed out. Mr. Shinohara sipped his tea and took a few deep breaths to calm himself. I was out for, 15 minutes, I'd say. Luckily, the arrow he shot at me missed, but when I went over to my wife, I found another arrow buried in her chest. The funeral had been yesterday, he added. That was when he finally began to cry. They had no children, he sobbed, just a pleasant life together, the 2 of them. The man took off his glasses and wiped his eyes. The super had sent a notice around warning everyone to watch out for a stranger in a hood, but my wife's been spending so much time at work, she must not have seen it. If I'd gotten there first, seen who it was through the peephole, I'd never have opened the door. It's my fault. I should have warned her. He couldn't say another word. Sup. I'm Yokota. The final witness was a college student living on his own. My room's like a total mess. Okay if we talk here in the front hall? He glanced pointedly over his shoulder at the cluttered hallway leading into apartment 301. The first two witnesses found their apartments too traumatizing to stay in and had been put up in a hotel for the time being. Yokota, however, was still in his apartment, so Himino and Aki had decided to visit him there. Guy showed up yesterday. Gotta tell ya, I was freaked out. I opened the door and bam. He tries to shoot me with an arrow or something. It's like, who does that? He waved his hands in front of his face, conveying exaggerated shock. According to his story, he'd been watching television when the doorbell rang. He answered the door to find a man in a black hood standing outside. He couldn't see the man's eyes, but in his mouth was a row of cruel fangs. You say they sent a notice around? Nah, never seen it. I heard about some kind of trouble downstairs, but I didn't give it much thought. I just opened the door. Guess that's why there's a peephole, huh? He tousled his hair, which was cut and bleached in a trendy campus style. When he shot at me, I thought for sure I was dead. But I woke up just fine about 15 minutes later. Thought for a sec maybe I was in heaven, but nah, I was still in this dump. Nah, I wasn't hurt. Guess the arrow missed me. I must have passed out from fear. Pretty sad, huh? Anyway, the guy didn't steal anything. I'm lucky his aim sucks. The events were still fresh in Yokota's mind, and he could readily recount them in detail. As he was talking, a phone on the table in the hallway rang, and he excused himself to answer it. Yo. Yeah. I'm talking to a couple of peeps from public safety. Nah, I didn't do nothing. I'm the victim. What, really? No shit? His eyes went wide. Something the matter? Himino asked. Nothing. Just something I gotta deal with. You guys got everything you need? Yokota hurriedly hung up the phone and shut the door. With the last interview over, Himino and Aki returned to the administrative office. May I ask if you've learned anything? The superintendent said hesitantly. Himino drained her cup of tea in one swig. All I can say is, we'll manage. We're pros at this. You're sure? Yeah. But we'll need your help with something. Of course, of course. Just say the word. Let us stay in one of the apartments tomorrow evening. Tomorrow evening? Of course, I'll arrange it. Which apartment would you like? Himino set her cup gently back on the desk. 401. The old man, fearing another incident, asked Himino and Aki to stay that night too, to provide surveillance and security. They decided to make camp in the office. The office comprised an entrance room with a reception window and the break room where they conducted 2 of their 3 interviews. Aki sat in the reception area, on alert, while Himino sat down to a takeout feast in the break room. Come on, Aki, she called. Have a bite. Can't. I'm keeping watch. The office was just inside the entrance to the old apartment complex, so it was easy to keep track of anyone who came or went. Aki was scanning the area relentlessly, knowing the fiend might appear without warning when a spoon laden with fried rice popped into view. Eat. I didn't order the best fried rice in town for you to let it go cold. Go on, say ah. Himino hovered over him, the spoon in one hand and a steaming takeout container in the other. I can feed myself, Aki said sullenly. Clearly, going hungry wasn't going to be an option. He took the spoon and tried a bite of the rice. It came from the ramen place Himino had pointed out while they were driving, and it was as tasty as she claimed. The rice fell apart in his mouth, releasing a shock of black pepper and a rich aroma of sesame oil. Perfect accents. And this is their alleged main attraction, the soy ramen. With a grin, Himino proffered a bowl. Aki paused. He remembered what she'd said, that the fried rice was delicious, but the ramen was terrible. Cautiously, he took a single mouthful. Ugh! He almost choked and spat the noodles back out. It was worse than he could have imagined. What were they using for stock? Ditch water? Himino laughed. Awful, right? They call it swamp ramen. Supposedly it's because it's so rich and thick, but the truth is it tastes like a swamp. If you knew it was bad, why did you order it? Aki asked, exasperated. Himino encouraged him. You have to taste the horror for yourself. Here, there's plenty more. Aki frowned at his cackling senior. Enough. We've got work to do. We don't have time to stuff our faces. HM? Sure we do. Humans can't fight on an empty stomach. A pro knows to fill up when they have the chance. Fine, Aki admitted. Maybe you're right about the food. But what's that you're holding up now? After placing the delivery order, Himino had gone on a beer run. Immediately, before the food had even arrived, she cracked open the first beer. There were already 5 empty cans lined up on the desk. Number 6 was in her right hand, preparing to join them. This is a drink called beer, Himino informed him. You're mocking me. Oh, relax, Himino laughed. You need food to fight, and you need beer to party. Need I remind you this isn't a party? Aki admonished. We're here to exterminate a fiend. You're so serious, Aki. The serious ones always die young. I don't plan to go down that easy. Himino was quiet for a moment. Then Aki heard beer number 6 hiss as she opened it. She flopped down into the office chair. It's fine. We're only staying here tonight because the old guy begged us to. The real work starts tomorrow. What do you mean? Aki asked. I mean this will all be settled, but not tonight. Think of this as Fiend Hunt Eve. She shoved fried rice into her mouth and raised her beer to toast an invisible companion. Aki frowned, put off by her flippant behavior. How could she possibly know the fiend wouldn't show up that night? It could be prowling at that very moment. Or did she already have the whole case figured out? She brushed off his questions with a wave of her arms. Where's the fiend? No idea. Aki was more annoyed than ever. In that case, how can you be sure it'll all be settled tomorrow? Hey, I'm a pro. That's not an answer. Touchy, touchy. Are you eating right? I'm trying to be serious here. That settled it. He would never get along with this woman. Aki continued to glare at Himino from his spot at the reception desk. Unfazed, she pulled out a cigarette. I don't know where the fiend is, but since it's only attacked residents of this complex, it's probably nesting here or in the vicinity. Then why are we sitting here with our thumbs up our rear ends? We should be out searching every nook and cranny. In this huge complex? Himino said. If that's what you want to do, I won't stop you, but we don't have a warrant. You can't barge into apartments, occupied or otherwise. Aki thought quickly. The fiend has a distinctive appearance. We can ask around and try to identify the host. A fiend couldn't alter the basic appearance of the body it possessed. If this fiend's host was someone from the building, the neighbors might recognize it. Aki and Himino could put together a sketch from the descriptions of the 3 eyewitnesses and show it around the building. Surely, sooner or later, they'd find someone who knew the person it had once been. Maybe it was even occupying its host's apartment. Said Himino. You're sharper than I gave you credit for, Aki. That's a backhanded compliment if I ever heard one. I hate to break it to you, though, but you've overlooked a crucial detail, she said with glee. Close, but no cigar. Excuse me? Himino explained. The fiend wore a hood and kept its head down during the attacks. The only thing that the witnesses saw clearly were its fangs, which I bet it didn't have when it was human. We don't have any info we could use to draw a sketch. Case closed. Or, rather, case still open. Aki fell silent. Maybe the hood could provide a lead, then. No, that wouldn't work. A black hoodie? It was the most generic item of clothing imaginable. Not enough to narrow down a list of suspects, even if they had a list. Aki pursed his lips and picked up a bottle of mineral water. All right. But that makes me even less confident we're going to wrap this up tomorrow. You think? I say that if we can't find the fiend, we should set a trap and let the fiend find us. Great. Ow. We have no reason to believe the fiend will show up tomorrow, and Aki stopped mid-sentence, his fingers frozen on the bottle cap. Himino laughed out loud. Finally put the timeline together, did you? The first attack was 5 days ago. The second one, 3 days ago. And the most recent, yesterday. It's attacking every 2 days. Which, if the rule held true, implied that the next attack would come tomorrow night. Why, though? Who knows? Frankly, who cares? Every fiend is different. It's risky to get hung up on the details. The best you can do is look for patterns and try to deduce what kind of personal rules they follow. Anyway, some fiends retain a handful of human memories. Maybe this one used to be a real or attentive type. Tomorrow it is, then. Yeah, but that's not all. All 3 attacks occurred after nightfall. I think the fiend waits until everyone is home with their families. So the fiend appears after dark tomorrow, Aki deduced. Bingo! That's my boy. I ought to give you a kiss on the cheek for being such a good guesser. Himino wobbled toward him, but he deftly pushed her away. Pass. The alcohol was obviously going to her head. Himino pouted. Aki frowned back. We still haven't answered the biggest question of all. Where do you propose we ambush the fiend? If they set up shop in the wrong spot, they could wait all night and never see a thing. The office had a good view of anyone who came in, which might be effective unless the fiend was already hiding in the complex, in which case it was pointless. Himino lit her cigarette slowly, as if to telegraph her disdain. She watched the smoke drift away, clearly pleased with herself. I told the guy we needed a room, didn't I? Aki didn't respond at first. Yes, she'd asked the owner to let them use one of the apartments in the building. Specifically, apartment 401. You think you know which apartment it's going to hit? There's no reason to think. Aki stopped again. There was reason. The first set of victims had lived in apartment 101, the second in 202. And the third victim was in 301. The fiend seemed to be going up 1 floor each time. If Himino was right and it was following some internal rule, it would hit the 4th floor next. Still, Aki wasn't convinced. We don't know for sure it'll be 401. What if it's one of the other apartments on the 4th floor? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've got it right. Himino dismissed the concern. I think the fiend starts at the first apartment off floor and rings doorbells until someone answers. I don't agree. The fiend had attacked the first apartment on floors 1 and 3, but on the 2nd floor it had attacked the 2nd apartment. That proved it didn't always hit the first place. Himino ground her cigarette out in a nearby ashtray. She lit a new one. I noticed when we got here that 201 didn't have any laundry hanging outside, and there are no curtains in the windows. That apartment's not occupied. That's why the fiend attacked the 2nd apartment on that floor. If our target continues to play by the rules, it should show up at 401 after sundown tomorrow. We just have to wait for it. Case, well, we'll see. She cocked her head at Aki. How about it? Starting to feel respect for me well up in your heart? Aki remained silent. He had all the same clues before him, but he hadn't connected any of the dots. Was that the leg up that experience gave a hunter? True, it'd be easier to plan if we knew what kind of fiend we're dealing with. But given the number of survivors it leaves behind, it's kind of a slacker by fiend standards. We can figure the rest out once the fighting starts. Himino took a long drag on her cigarette and smirked. At Aki. What? You thought I wanted that apartment so we could shack up together? Believe me, I didn't. Didn't figure you were the type to pine for an older woman, Aki. You're drunk. Himino had been drinking beer like water, and her face was faintly flushed. Sure am. So be a good boy and get me some shochu from the corner store so I can sober up a little. You can use my car. How would hard liquor help you sober up? Anyway, I don't have my license yet. No fooling? That brought Himino back down to earth. She blinked, then slumped over the desk, listless. Crap. Another useless newbie. Aki fumed. He wanted to spit something back at her, but after getting an inkling of how far she outclassed him as a hunter, he found the words caught in his throat. Here's your punishment when we fight the fiend tomorrow. You stand back and watch. I'll take care of this creature myself. What? Are you crazy? Aki leapt up. This was going too far. A resident passing by the window looked over, startled. You listen to me, you drunkard. I didn't become a devil hunter to sit on the sidelines. He clapped a hand on Himino's shoulder, but she didn't stir. Her eyes were unfocused. Cocky newbie, she muttered, almost to herself. Can't even drive. That has nothing to do with it. Doesn't even smoke. Even less relevant. You'll die. What? I told you, she murmured. 5 of my partners have bid it. I'm a jinx. Least, I seem to be. Himino finally turned toward him, but her gaze was dark and empty. She didn't seem to see anything at all. It was the way she'd looked when he met her at the graveyard. She reached out, hesitant, as if feeling for something in the dark. You're still so young, Aki. Look at your baby face. Doesn't feel right, letting you die. Still don't really think of me as your partner, huh? Aki was frustrated. You can take your pity and stuff it. I told you, I'm not going to go down so easily. Himino didn't seem to hear him. They say they're a ramen place, but the noodles are so bad and the fried rice is so good. I told them they should drop the ramen and focus on fried rice, but the owner, he's stubborn. He's convinced he can make the world's best ramen. Aki wasn't sure what she was getting at. All he knew was that, having tried the alleged star dish, the owner was making a big mistake. By not listening. Yeah? So what? They're all like that. Think they know what they're doing. They're so sure. So sure and so wrong. Poof. Gone. Leaving their partner behind. Aki looked down at Himino, draped over the desk. She looked ready to pass out. He had nothing but disdain for her unprofessional behavior, but now he was beginning to understand it. Himino, he broke off. Himino's one eye was closed and her breathing was even. She was asleep. Damn, Aki muttered. He took a swig from his bottle of water. It had gone tepid. The mingled alcohol and tobacco on Himino's breath burned his nostrils. The only sound in the room was the heater laboring away. A hollow sound in an empty night. When the old man came to check in the next morning, Aki told him there hadn't been any trouble. Then he put in an appearance at public safety, where he found Himino had taken the morning off, leaving only a succinct instruction: meet me at the scene at dusk. He kept busy at headquarters without his partner around. When the sun began its descent through the sky, he hopped on a bus. The old man showed him to apartment 401. The occupants had taken their valuables and gone to stay with relatives for the night. Word must have gotten around about what was happening, because the grounds of the complex, full of noise and life just the evening before, were empty. The shadows of the buildings swathed the area in darkness. The playground stood abandoned, a seesaw rocked back and forth in the wind, each movement producing a little screech like the cry of a wild animal. The apartment's floor plan was simple. Just past the entryway was the toilet. At the end of a short hallway, a door opened into a dining room. Adjacent to the dining room were a bath on one side and a pair of standard bedrooms on the other. The climate control was on the fritz, leaving the air chilly. The evening sun pouring through the aluminum-framed windows dyed the tatami floors orange. They smelled noticeably musty. Aki noted a calendar marked with a local supermarket steal days. A ventilation fan dripping with oil. A refrigerator whose age looked like it could be measured geologically, with a notice about trash collection stuck to the door with a magnet. It wasn't much, but it was somebody's home. To Aki, it felt like a taste of what he'd lost in Hokkaido. The gun devil had taken this from him. Home. Family. Everything. Aki checked the time. 3:30. He found a spot in the cluttered dining room where he could sit and watch the front door. He slid his katana out of its scabbard and gazed at the blade. The faint silver gleam helped him calm down. He expected to make a contract with the devil sooner rather than later, and it felt good to have his weapon ready. He took a deep breath, hand still on his sword, and at that moment the doorknob turned. Aki drew in his breath and jumped to his feet. A familiar one-eyed face popped in. Just dropping by. Himino joked. When she saw Aki's face, she scratched her head awkwardly. Sorry for passing out on you yesterday, Aki. If it makes you feel any better, my head's pounding from the hangover, and I ache all over from sleeping on the desk. Yeah, well, you've got no one but yourself to blame. I don't usually go down that easy. Maybe I'm getting old. Hey, how old do you think I am? Don't care. Himino sighed, then locked the door and sat down beside him. I don't remember last night super clearly. I didn't say anything, like, weird, did I? Lots of things. Oh no, really? But I didn't get violent, did I? You got in my face, but I pushed you back. Ugh. I'm the worst. Pathetic. Himino clutched her head dramatically, then gave up the histrionics with another sigh. Well, what's done is done. I'll have to make it up to you by absolutely crushing it tonight. With a hop. She got to her feet. He could hear her joints crack as she stretched. Just remember what I told you, she said, pausing in front of him. You stand back and watch. You remember that much, huh? He was damned if he was going to listen, though. The hallway was too narrow for both of them to attack at once, so the best he could plan for was to be ready to jump in at any moment. Now they just had to wait for their opponent to arrive. Aki realized his breathing had grown short. He put a hand on his chest and took a few deep, deliberate breaths to center himself. Even Himino had stopped chattering. Twilight faded into dark, accompanied by an announcement over the complex's PA system: a suspicious character has been sighted in the neighborhood. Please be sure to lock your doors. A melancholy day and melody followed. Then there was only the slow march of time. Aki felt like his nerves were being shaved away bit by bit. No fiend so far. For a second, he was filled with doubt. Maybe they guessed wrong. Himino, however, showed no sign of concern. The slanting sunlight outside dyed the sky orange. It was the witching hour, a liminal moment between day and night as the world slipped into darkness. Ding dong. The friendly notes of the doorbell broke the clinging gloom. Aki's hand tensed on his sword. He traded a short glance with Himino. The enemy had come. Aki was about to stand when Himino held up a hand to stop him. She approached the door as quietly as possible, looked through the peephole, then made a circle with her fingers. Okay. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. The clanging peal of the bell. Turned insistent. "What's the plan?" Aki hissed. He suddenly realized that over the past night and day, they hadn't talked about what they were going to do or how they were going to do it. Maybe Himino had deliberately kept him in the dark. After all, she didn't want him in the fight. Now all he wanted to know was how Himino planned to strike. Whoever the human host had been, the fiend carried a crossbow and knew how to use it. Its MO seemed to be to attack the moment the door was opened. Blocking that first strike would be key to the entire battle. Then, as Aki's jaw dropped in disbelief, Himino casually opened the door. The fiend was exactly as the witnesses had described. Its eyes were hidden in a black hood, but it seemed to be gazing at the ground. Twisted fangs sprouted at wild angles from its mouth. Judging from what he could see of its body, Aki guessed the host had been in middle age. And there was the infamous crossbow, clutched in the creature's right hand. It was loaded with a small, black, very sharp arrow, and it was pointed right at Himino. "What the hell are you doing?" Aki shouted. Himino didn't even try to dodge. She knew the fiend's reported attack pattern as well as he did, yet she stood still, as if offering herself up. Aki sprang to his feet, ready to run to her, when the fiend choked out a soft grunt. Its right arm twisted back, dragged by an unseen force. The arrow lodged in the ceiling, never coming anywhere near Himino. She continued to stand calmly, now grasping the air with her right hand. "Wah!" Aki stopped short, astonished. With a flourish, Himino thrust out her arm. Her fist stopped well short of the fiend, yet there was an audible thump. With a cry, the fiend bent double and gagged with pain. It was flung backward, striking the door, then pitched forward again. Aki gasped down at the fiend lying on the ground. Was that a devil's power? Bingo! Himino glanced back at him with a smirk and gave him a thumbs up with the hand that had just demolished the fiend. "I have a contract with the ghost devil. I traded my right eye for its right hand. Completely invisible, way powerful. You could say it's a handy thing to have around. You could have told me." "Oh, didn't I?" "No, you didn't," he snapped. He knew it wasn't advisable for hunters to go around telling everyone which devils they had contracts with, but surely you ought to inform someone when you were going into battle together. Yet more proof that she still didn't see him as her partner. Himino didn't appear to feel so much as a twinge of guilt about it. She turned back to the collapsed fiend. "Oh, well, the problem's taken care of. And now we're square for me getting sloppy drunk on you. How about it? Feel like giving me the respect a senior deserves yet?" A pause. "I'm thinking about it." Himino chuckled and nodded. Then she reached out with her invisible hand to grab the fiend by the throat. Aki's brow furrowed. Something was off. Some tiny detail. What was it? The fiend was still splayed motionless on the floor. Aki dropped into a fighting stance but saw nothing to attack. Himino's ghost arm was about to make short work of the fiend. "No. Wait. Get down." Aki grabbed Himino's collar and yanked her to the ground. An arrow sliced through the air, grazing her hair before burying itself in the back of the door. "Wah!" Himino sat up and blinked. Did that arrow come from the fiend? Yeah. No shit? But it never had time to reload. I know. The crossbow had gone off, firing its only arrow, when Himino's ghost had twisted its arm. That round was buried in the ceiling. Not only had the fiend not had a chance to reload, it had never even moved. Yet a black arrow had remained knocked in the crossbow. That was the errant detail Aki had unconsciously picked up on. With a groan, the fiend pulled itself up. The hood fell back, revealing thinning hair and a forehead carved with deep lines. But the fiend's eyes were its most distinctive feature. They were flat black, like the painted-on eyes of a doll. A dark miasma drifted like a mist from the creature's eyes and mouth, as if its hatred were physically condensing. The mist curled down its arms, where it solidified into 2 black crossbows, 1 in each hand. Each weapon held 5 rounds. Ah. Now I get it. Himino jumped to her feet. She put a hand on Aki's shoulder, then backed away. Guess I should have been a little more careful. Here it comes. Himino and Aki threw open the door to the dining room and dove through as arrows buried themselves in the wall. The crossbow hadn't belonged to the fiend's human host after all. The weapons were part of the fiend itself. Since they were supernatural, it was probably too much to hope that they'd run out of ammunition. Aki slammed the door shut and braced it with his feet. On the other side, the fiend pounded on the door so hard Aki could feel the blows through his entire body. Himino shoved a cabinet full of tableware across the room to use as a blockade. Aki drove his sword through the door. He didn't feel an impact on the other side. The fiend must have dodged. Its response came in the form of black arrowheads that burst through the door like nails from a nail gun. Aki twisted out of the way. Himino thrust out her right arm, directing a phantom punch past the door. There was a yelp as she connected. The fiend must have gotten back on its feet, though, because a bevy of arrows rammed the door with the speed of a machine gun round. Aki stabbed, Himino punched, arrows fired. It seemed to go on forever. Only a door stood between the 2 sides, but since neither could see their target, neither side's accuracy was very good. With each exchange, the wood of the door strained and splintered. The building was old to begin with, and it wasn't built for a fight like this. Himino gave the cabinet another shove, blocking the door entirely. As far as defensive structures went, it didn't instill much confidence. The cabinet shook under each blow from the fiend, sending plates shattering on the ground. I feel bad for whoever lives here. And for myself. This is gonna mean extra paperwork. Himino patted Aki on the back. No crying over spilled plates, though. Aki, fall back. Excuse me? I'll handle this. Somehow. The blockade was only delaying the inevitable. To end this, they had to get line of sight on their adversary, which meant giving it line of sight on them. It'd be better if they were able to move first. Unfortunately, the fiend was still armed with its brace of crossbows. Himino wouldn't be able to pin both of its arms with her single ghost hand. One would always be free to shoot. She could ignore the weapons and go straight for its throat, or try to land a single, fatal blow to its heart. But if it took her more than an instant, she'd be riddled with arrows. In these tight quarters, there would be no way to avoid them. Aki could see only one solution to win this: they'd have to work together. He braced his shoulder against the quaking cabinet and sucked in a large breath. I'll pin it down. Then you can do whatever it is you're going to do. No. You're still new at this, Aki. You'll only get yourself killed. Himino's normally flipped tone was replaced by something tinged with panic. She grabbed his free shoulder with all the strength of a hunter who had buried her 5th partner just 2 weeks ago. Aki placed his hand over hers and gently pried it away. Yeah, I'm new at this. But I'm your partner. Aki. Let's do this. He pressed his back to the doorframe and kicked the cabinet aside. With the weight gone, the half-demolished door flew open. He could sense the fiend, close enough to touch, but he resisted the urge to lash out with his sword. If he missed his mark by even an inch, he'd make himself a target. His job was to immobilize the enemy long enough for his partner to strike. Calmly, now, steady breath. Focus. The instant the fiend entered the room, Aki's hand snapped out and grabbed its right arm. Not missing a beat, the fiend raised the crossbow in its left hand. But Aki was just as quick. With his free hand, he grabbed the fiend's left wrist. Now both crossbows were neutralized. Himino didn't waste the chance to wrap her ghost hand around the fiend's neck. It screamed in agony. Now that they had it literally by the throat, victory seemed assured. Then Aki's eyes went wide. As the fiend screamed, a cruel black arrow appeared in its throat. "Aki!" Himino shouted. "Forget about me. Finish it." She had to strike. There wouldn't be a second chance. An invisible fist wrung the fiend's neck like a dish towel. In a final burst of spite, the creature spat the arrow from its throat. It slammed into Aki's chest with a thwack. The monster's death rattle was drowned out by Himino's scream. "Aki! Aki! I'm all right," he whispered. "I will not die." It was the last thing he said before he blacked out. When he came to, he could feel the scratch of old tatami flooring under his head. "I'm alive?" Himino was looking down at him. When she saw him open his eyes, she almost collapsed with relief. Aki glanced around the room from his position on the floor. Shards of broken china were everywhere. The fiend's headless corpse lay in the hallway. Outside the window, the twilight had deepened. He found a clock and discovered he'd been unconscious for about 15 minutes. "I told you I wouldn't die." "The arrow hit you, didn't it?" Himino asked. "Yeah. I don't see it anywhere." "I figured as much." Himino shot him a questioning look. He tried to marshal enough of his wits to explain. "I thought there was something funny about the fiend's pattern." "How do you mean?" "In every attack, there was a survivor. At first I thought it was dumb luck, or the fiend was sloppy. Until you pointed out how precise the rest of its behavior was. Attacking every other day, working its way up the building floor by floor, starting from the first apartment each time. Ain't or attentive, right? Didn't seem like the type that would rely on luck or miss its shots. So I thought maybe the survivors weren't a mistake. Maybe they were just what the fiend wanted." Himino said nothing, silently urging him to continue. "You said it yourself," Aki commented. "It's easier to plan if you know what kind of fiend you're dealing with." So I went back over what happened in those attacks. In the first incident, the woman who had been shot first survived and the rest of her family was killed. In the second, the wife died while her husband, the second target, survived. The third case involved a student living alone who survived even after seemingly being shot. "What's the connection?" Himino asked. "Other than the surprisingly high survival rate? My theory is that a person hit with the fiend's arrow is knocked out but lives. Instead, whoever they love most dies." Himino gasped. "I think we took on the fiend of loneliness." "Loneliness?" "My guess? A man died alone somewhere in this complex and was possessed by the loneliness devil. The fiend didn't want to kill people. It wanted to make people as desolate as it was. That's what happened, right? The survivors were left with no one." "Are you sure about that?" "The woman in the first attack lost her family. But what about the couple in the second attack? The wife was attacked first. By your logic, shouldn't she have survived and the husband died?" "Yeah. If she'd loved him." That brought Himino up short. "She was having an affair at work," explained Aki. "She no longer loved the man she was married to. When she got hit with the arrow, she passed out, but her husband lived. But the poor guy still loved his wife, so when he got shot, she died." "Hang on. An affair at work? How could you possibly know that?" "I did some investigating while you were sleeping off that hangover. At the exact time the apartment was attacked, the wife's boss died under mysterious circumstances. An arrow through the heart." "What about the third case, then?" Himino gaped. "You remember how the guy got a phone call at the end of our interrogation? It really seemed to upset him. While you were down for the count, I looked into that too. Turns out his mother died. Same deal. She was a single mother, all he had. The phone call, Aki gathered, had been from a neighbor who discovered the mother's body." Himino blinked her eye twice, then 3 times. You knew the person who gets shot doesn't die. Is that why you were willing to take the hit? Pretty much. He hadn't exactly been eager to go down for 15 minutes. But he'd been ready to throw himself in front of the arrow if necessary. You didn't tell me any of this. Pot, kettle. You wouldn't even tell me what we were here to do. Yeah, but... Himino's face contorted in exasperation. Still think I'm just cannon fodder? Himino gave him a long, hard look. Abruptly, something seemed to occur to her. Hang on here. I have to admit, I'm almost impressed, but that was reckless. You knew you'd survive, but the people you cared about would die. How could you possibly do it, knowing that? Believe me, it wasn't a problem. The hell it wasn't. What about your family, Aki? Friends? A girlfriend? Aki stood up, brushing the dirt off his suit. The sun in the western sky was red as blood, soaking the world in a throbbing, melancholy glow. They'd named his brother after it. Teo. It meant sun. But he was cut off from its warmth now, buried deep in the cold, hard ground. The sun would never rise again for Aki's little brother. He'd never feel the warmth of dawn on his skin. Aki would never see him walking over the horizon. Teo had this much in common with his namesake. He was utterly, forever, beyond Aki's grasp. For the barest instant, the dust drifting through the air, caught in the dying light, looked like the snow falling on his home. He said, "There's no one left I care about." With the case resolved, they waited outside the apartment for the cleanup crew. Aki leaned against the 4th-floor railing, gazing down at the city below. Himino lit a cigarette. You don't smoke, Aki? The chill wind lifted her bangs. An airship floated lazily in the distant sky. Aki didn't look at her. No. It'll rot your bones. We're gonna be working together closely. You should learn. I'm not here to make friends. He heard Himino sigh softly. Let me guess. You came to public safety to kill the gun devil, right? That made him turn. It's the same for all the dark and brooding types who join public safety. Since we're the only ones allowed to carry pieces of that damn gun, Himino explained. That much was certainly true. He was doing all this to get at the gun devil, the devil that had taken his family. He was prepared to sacrifice everything to do it. As far as he was concerned, he already had. Did Himino recognize the commitment Aki had made? Her tone gave nothing away as she chirped, us devil hunters don't live long anyway. It's not the smoking that's gonna kill you. I won't bite it so easily, Aki said firmly. You better not. Himino leaned back. With the faintest of smiles on her face, she said, it's a hassle when my partners die on me. There was a gust of wind, but he was sure he'd heard it, partners. Himino exhaled a trail of smoke that meandered through the winter air and tickled Aki's nostrils. He thought suddenly that the acrid aroma of nicotine and tar wasn't so unbearable after all. Himino. Aki murmured. The snow was still falling outside his hotel room in Hokkaido. He closed his eyes to it as his departed partner's name crossed his lips. That had been his first case as a devil hunter. Not that much time had passed, so why did it feel like it had happened long ago? Because so much had changed, he decided. He'd started treating his partner with the respect due to a senior officer and had even learned how to be halfway polite. Together they buried devil after devil along with more of their colleagues than Aki wanted to remember. It wasn't just life around him that had changed, though. There was something else now. Aki gazed around the room. Denji and Power were still snoring boisterously. Himino, he said, I don't think I could go up against the loneliness fiend now. He'd been prepared to give up everything to kill the gun devil. There had been no sacrifice he wasn't willing to make. He had no one to care about. And now here he was, worried about losing these two. After the loss of his family, he hadn't believed he'd ever find anything or anyone he wished to protect, anyone whose happiness mattered to him. The blankets shifted. Denji crawled out from under power. "What's up with you, all lost in the view?" "Oh, shut up." Denji sat across from him and looked out the window. "Can't see crap with all this snow." Aki was silent for a moment. Slowly he brought his can of beer to his lips. "Every year, when I went to visit my family's graves, I'd remember nothing but bad things. It was depressing. But this time, you guys were such pests that I didn't have the time to get lost in bad memories." Denji gave him a blank look. "You're welcome." A corner of the bleak, snow-clad sky was beginning to brighten. Morning was coming to Aki's frost-stricken home. End of Chapter 3. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.